Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I know it's a little bit cold outside, so much appreciated. My talk is data science versus the drunk driver, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of storytelling tonight with some data science undertones. So my name is Michael Zouhri, and I'm a pretty average guy in most respects. I like hanging out with my friends, I like going out to see movies, I like just relaxing on weekends, pretty normal things. I'm a little bit of a serial entrepreneur, but other than that, nothing too crazy. But on January 12th, 2019 of this year, I was hit by a drunk driver. And I was actually hit by a drunk driver who fled the scene of the accident. I don't need to say how terrible and scary that sort of situation is. The worst part was I spent 3 months in hard recovery. So I was rushed to the emergency room. I had an emergency CT scan done, and I spent 3 months in hard recovery, which means immobile. I also live out on an acreage, so to compound my situation to make it even worse, I live alone out on an acreage, and I couldn't take care of my property, which means not cleaning the snow, and we had a pretty bad winter. So I actually got snowed in twice. Because of my condition, I couldn't leave the property, couldn't do anything about it, and actually ran out of food provisions twice. Pretty sketchy times. When you go through something like that, you end up with a legal case, unsurprisingly. So I did what I think most people do. I started looking for someone to represent my case. You grow up and you see billboards like this, and you think, well, I guess that's what I do. That's a normal thing, right? Something happens to you, you go find a lawyer. But words cannot describe just how aggravating and frustrating, and honestly, there are not enough negative adjectives to describe just how terrible the entire process is. There's a couple problems with the legal services industry. It's broken fundamentally. One, it's deceptive pricing. They tell you 30% no win, no fee. It's actually closer to 40% because they don't tell you about cost, disbursements, and sales tax. You can't get estimates to shop around because if you want to talk about your specific case, like what are the complexities, how long is it going to take to recover, what are the certain complications that I might have to deal with, they need you to sign a contract. And once you sign a contract, they own your case, hence you can't shop around. They have misaligned interest. It's better economically for your lawyer to actually close 10 cases a year at $10,000 than maybe your one case for 50. And if you want to handle it on your own, well, good luck, because do you know what your leg is worth? Where do you even start? So I was super frustrated by the whole process. You guys might not know this, but the number one thing that people actually Google search when they're represented by a lawyer is, I can't get a hold of my lawyer. I don't know what's going on with my case. What do I do? No customer service. Frustrated, I actually went down to the law library. And I have a friend who's a former civil litigator, and he showed me which books to pick out and how to use the law library. And I taught myself actually how to litigate my own case. Turns out, it's not that complicated. The truth of the matter is, it's a little bit of evidence. If you understand the rules, you apply some decision trees. There's some calculations you need to do after that. You throw it into a template, and you're ready with a settlement proposal. It's pretty straightforward. In general, there are 5 heads of damage that you can claim. Number 1 is, I think, the most obvious, pain and suffering. Everyone sort of innately understands that if you go through something like that, you probably have a pain and suffering claim. But there's also 4 other heads of damage: loss of housekeeping, loss of income, cost of care, and out-of-pocket expenses. So things like gas mileage, bills for parking, etc. Those 4, so numbers 2 through 5, those 4 categories of damage are actually relatively straightforward. It's simple arithmetic. You just add up your expenses. But pain and suffering is really, really challenging. Like, how do you figure out what pain and suffering is worth? So that's actually the hardest part of the problem, and that's where I started. Turns out lawyers, when they try and figure it out, turn to something called case law. So case law is these reams of text that have gone to trial, and a judge has ruled what somebody is owed for their pain and suffering. So a lawyer will read 2 or 3 cases where someone had injuries that were similar-ish to what you're going through. 2 or 3 similar-ish, because no 2 people have the exact same injuries. Pretty straightforward. They will cherry pick 2 or 3 cases and they will go high. And then the defense side, the insurance side, will cherry pick 2 or 3 low. And then they'll fight about it for years. And you're stuck in the middle. That seems absolutely crazy. They're guessing high, you're guessing, and nobody even knows what's going on. So I thought that was stupid. So the first thing that I did is I built a system that could actually read thousands of case law files. So the hardest thing to do is get this. Getting structured data out of reams of case text. If you've never read case law before, it's pages and pages and pages of natural language. It's a tremendous challenge to get anything out of it. But if you do manage to get it, then you can actually do something really cool. You can apply statistical models to tell you exactly what pain and suffering is worth instead of just guessing from 2 or 3 cases. So when you actually do the laborious task and you structure this out, you end up with a really cool distribution. So if you're into data science, and I think most people here in the room are, this is actually what it looks like. So this is all of the awards adjusted for inflation from 2004. Because remember, some awards were in 2004, some were 2006, some are 2010. And you need them in 2019 dollars to make sure everything's fair. Under the Supreme Court, there is a law that says no pain and suffering award can exceed $400,000. It was actually set in 1978. It's $100,000, so adjusted for inflation today, it's roughly $388-ish thousand. And the nice thing is we know that we did it right because nothing exceeds that amount. So I actually built a simple tool that would help me do that. So let's see if this works here. I wasn't sure if I would have access to the internet. So I built this tool just to help me with my own case. So this is what's called a quantum lookup. So I'm specifically looking up pain and suffering. So now that I have all the structured data, I could do something like, oh, okay, 2018, British Columbia, and maybe you hurt your ankle, and maybe you also have a brain injury. So if we actually look it up, I can see that for cases matching exactly those 2 injuries, there were 37. After adjusting it into 2019 dollars for inflation, I see that the adjustment amount is $129,309. So this is way more accurate than any lawyer knows about your data. I thought it would also be interesting to see what is the range. So I picked out the lowest, the highest, and just for fun, I did things like males versus female. I don't have all of the data represented in here, but I also did capture things like what people do for work, how old they were, and so on. So there's some really interesting things around that, and we'll get to that in a bit. But I also don't want to read the case, but I think it's really important to show your work. So what I did, because I didn't want to read all reams of case law, it's pretty boring stuff. I actually created all of the metadata that I could quickly visualize to get the highlights of the case. So if I click this, I can actually read the raw case. But I can also see that this case took place in British Columbia. It went to the Supreme Court. The incident happened in Vernon, DC. The guy was 47 years old. He was involved in a motor vehicle collision, unmarried at the time, and he was awarded $170,000. In today's dollar amount, that's equal to $195,200. What kind of injuries did he have, you might ask? Well, here's a list of all of the injuries this particular person went through, and so on and so forth. So at a very, very quick glance, I can see exactly how much a case is roughly worth, how many cases support that dollar amount, and what sort of injuries the person might have been through. So I wasn't sure if I was going to have the internet, so I did some screen grabs of the exact same thing that I just showed you. But once I had all of that done, I was able to put together my own settlement proposal. The interesting thing about a settlement proposal is it has to be comprehensive and you want to justify your stuff. So I put that together. It ended up being a pretty thick document. But after years of media suggesting that you need a lawyer, I wasn't feeling super confident. Like, can I actually represent like a complicated case like this on my own? I don't know. Like it's pretty it's pretty overwhelming. So I actually went back to some of the lawyers that I originally talked to. Yeah, I actually went back to some of these guys. And I said, hey guys, listen, my settlement proposal is ready. Everything is done. Here's what I'm thinking. 10%, and you can be the face of my case. What do you think? It's a pretty good deal. They looked at my settlement proposal and they were like, wow, like this is amazing. Like, how did you put this thing together? And I said, well, I just built a tool. Like, obviously, right? Isn't that what anyone in this room would do? Just build a tool? So I was like, yeah, no, I just built like this obvious tool. And I wasn't thinking that it meant anything to them, right? Because again, I didn't think I was doing anything special. I was just solving my own problem. And he said, yeah, this is pretty amazing. I'm surprised you were able to get all this together. So here's what we're thinking. 40%, take it or leave it. And by the way, can we use your tool? Yeah, I was like, what the hell? Like that is absolutely crazy. It drove me nuts. So I was like, that's it. I'm done with these idiots. I'm going to deal with this on my own. Started talking about it, and shortly thereafter, access to justice groups started reaching out to me. So they started telling me some pretty crazy statistics. So apparently, every 4 years, 13 million Canadians are locked out of access to justice. And they're locked out for reasons of bad case economics, or they live in a rural and remote community, or they just can't afford an upfront retainer. There's tons of reasons for people to be locked out of access to justice. So I was like, oh, that's insane. So I went back to my friend who actually showed me how to use the law library, and I said, listen, this is a huge problem. What would it take to turn the suite of tools that I built into a full service solution? We kind of hemmed and hawed, and we were like, well, it turns out I did most of the work already, and all the heavy lifting was done. So it probably wouldn't be too much harder. So that's what we started working on. So 4 months ago, we put this up. So this is lean product, guys. This is what lean product looks like. This is how you validate the market. So I just put up this landing page. And in the last 4 months, since I put this up, we've had over $4 million in total case claim signups. That makes me larger than that idiot now. Yeah. In addition to that, we've also signed a prominent insurance company here in the region, and we have 2 more circling. So it's pretty crazy. I even won a data science award before we launched the MVP, which is the first time in my entire life I've ever won an award before the product came out. So it's pretty cool. You can use the product that I set to try and figure out how to settle your own claim. And the crazy thing is, you don't even have to do that well settling your own claim to be financially better off. So on a $100,000 settlement, 40% goes to your lawyer, but the insurance company on a $100,000 settlement actually pays out $130,000. I sat down with the CEO of the prominent insurance company, and he told me what his overhead margins are. They're about 30%. So on $130,000 that they pay out towards your settlement, you take home less than half. That's crazy. Yeah. So in order to be financially better off, you only have to beat 60% of whatever your lawyer would go for. Yeah. So it's actually a win-win-win. You don't actually have to do that well. You just have to do better than 60% of whatever your lawyer would ask for, if you know the numbers. It's a pretty low benchmark. So we just launched our MVP last week, and I wasn't sure if I would have internet again, so I took some screen grabs of it. So we do things like the general damages, loss of income, special damages, loss of housekeeping. What's really cool here is a lot of these formulas are actually fire tested. So all these formulas actually come from case law. So all of these have been tried in front of a judge, which means they've been accepted, and these have been set as actual rates. So we do things like loss of housekeeping, and we even do the prejudgment interest to tell people an estimate of what their claim is actually worth. So some interesting tidbits from my expedition on this journey is I did find it interesting exploring the data that women, on average, are awarded higher amounts for pain and suffering, not the other kinds of damages, for pain and suffering, than men, which is a curiosity because under the law, everything should be equal. I also saw in the data set that older people are often awarded less for pain and suffering than younger people. That's crazy. I actually think we might be the first people who have ever seen this data, just because it's so hard to get. But it's really, really interesting. Just an interesting side tidbit as well, 72% of pain and suffering awards that actually go to trial are for more than $50,000. So if you end up at trial, at least for the head of damage for pain and suffering, you're probably more than $50,000. So thank you guys for coming out tonight and listening to me. If anyone's interested in signing up for the beta or giving it a try, by all means, we also have a newsletter. Nothing is secret with us, so feel free to ask to be on that as well. It's an internal mailer, and you can contact me at any of the above. So thank you, and I'll take questions.